Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome. Good to be in community with each of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. As we normally do, just giving it a moment or two for people to get settled into our virtual learning space for today's episode of Intentional Conversations, where we intersect dialogue of diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership and business. So glad to have each of you here with us today. I'm Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC. And I just want to take a moment to shout out the NWC team who works tirelessly every single week, and they have for the past almost 5 years to bring this virtual learning experience to our broader community. So I'm very appreciative. I'm also grateful for you. You could be anywhere during this hour this Friday, but you're here with us, and it says to us that you value the time that we spend, the community that we've built, and we want to certainly honor your presence here today. Make sure that you go to the chat, let us know where you're joining the conversation from. It's always great for us to see the many different geographies that are represented across the US, and then even some folks who join us outside of the US. But we're always grateful. If you also feel inclined to share your LinkedIn information, that lets us know that you're willing for members of this community to connect with you beyond this hour of time. I'm going to ask my team to please share my LinkedIn. I certainly would love to be connected with each of you on that platform. We have a live LinkedIn audience today. And so for those that join us by tapping in through LinkedIn Live, we appreciate you being here as well. We like to make sure that we are connecting the community as best as possible. And that is by encouraging everyone to use the chat in the comment section if you're on LinkedIn to share your thoughts, your sentiments, any type of resources that are coming up for you that you believe would be of value to this broader community. We want to know about it. We want to share. Sharing is caring. This is also a way to connect us across both platforms as we learn with and from each other. So once again, this is Intentional Conversations vodcast, and so glad to see you here. This is going to be a great show. Welcome, and hope you enjoy the show. Let the conversations begin, and that is precisely what we're going to do. If you're just tuning in, you have joined Intentional Conversations vodcast. We also have a podcast version of our show where we extract the audio and we make it available in podcast capacity, wherever you like to get your podcast content. So I want to just lead us in. This is normally what I do. I share information about what's happening through some national observances for the month that we're in. And we are in the month of November. November is Native American Heritage Month. And so as per usual, anytime that we have an opportunity to stand in solidarity with those who are part of historically marginalized communities, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're lifting those individuals up, that we're demonstrating their value to our society. And so don't forget that Native American Heritage Month is a great opportunity for you to do that. I also want you to know that Monday we're going to be honoring our veterans. And so I have a special veteran in my life, my husband, prior military, prior Air Force officer, but there are many others that probably you are thinking of top of mind when you consider honoring the veterans and their sacrifice and service. Recognizing Transgender Awareness Week, the 13th through the 20th of this month. Let's do our best to stand in solidarity, to support individuals that are part of this community, and to make sure that we are doing all that we can to serve as really meaningful allies through our actions, not just our words, but our actions. And so November 13th through the 20th. Now, if you've been with me for quite some time, you know that we've shared a lot of information about the 4 LinkedIn learning courses that have been released over the past couple of years, where I serve as the instructor. Right now, LinkedIn is running a special where it's free through the end of December 31st, but only one of those courses, and that's Navigating AI, Artificial Intelligence, through an intersectional DEI lens. And so I hope you'll take advantage of that offering and share it out with all of those in your community. I also want to let you know that I had the wonderful opportunity to be a part of the Inspiring Workplaces Engagement 101 ebook that has been released. And so we're going to share a link to that ebook into the chat, as myself and several other authors who are speaking on topics around building a people-first culture and people believe in and belong to. So really important topic, lots of professional insights, and I hope that you will see that as a key resource. Now, speaking of books and authorship, I, of course, released Inclusion Uncomplicated in January of 2023. And so actually, January, it'll be 2 years for my book, baby. And in that month, we're going to be releasing the paperback version of Inclusion Uncomplicated. So I hope that you will see that as an opportunity to be able to add it to your library if you already do not have it. But stay tuned for more on that. But I did want you to be aware that the paperback version is coming soon. Now, when we think about the post-election and where we are right now, I think it's critically important for us to continue to find ways for organizations to really lean into the importance of civil discourse, to the importance of respectful conversations and dialogue as we're navigating a lot right now. And so one of the courses, in addition to the one I shared earlier, that I have completed for LinkedIn as the instructor is addressing hate speech in the workplace. It's a really great and timely topic. It helps us to really unpack what is the difference between free speech and hate speech, and how do we navigate that appropriately to prevent harm in the workplace, which certainly can impact productivity, people's well-being, and just a healthy work culture in general. So take advantage of that if you think it would be of value. We are booking now for co-hosts for Q1 of 2025. We almost have the entire first quarter booked, but there are a few additional spots remaining, and we love to get recommendations from our community. It is because of a lot of your connections that many of our podcast co-hosts have come to be a part of our community. And so we welcome those recommendations. You can send them directly to my colleague, Amora Carter at amora@nikawhite.com. Now, I want to give you a little bit of what you have to look forward to in the upcoming weeks as we close out November. In terms of our guest co-host for Intentional Conversations, I am really excited because on Friday, the 15th, we have the wonderful opportunity to welcome Lola Bakary. And Lola, if you don't know her, she is a wonderful marketing communications professional, and she does it with the lens of inclusivity. So please join us, and I know that you will not be disappointed for all the nuggets that she's going to share. And then following the 15th, the next Friday on the 22nd, we have my friend Natasha Wade. She has such a strong voice, very rich content. She's all about really trying to set women of color up for success and making sure that they get their flowers and all the things that they deserve for simply just being enough and being just wonderful contributors to our society. And so I look forward to that conversation with Natasha Wade. Now, it does me great pleasure to formally introduce today's guest co-host. And one of the things that I like to do is always read those individuals' personal accolades, credentials, all of the things that helps us to understand how they're showing up to the conversation. That feels always important to me because we have a lot of qualified individuals that are deserving of us really amplifying all of their credentials. And so today will be no different. I am so excited to welcome Amanda Miller Littlejohn, and she is a nationally recognized executive coach, speaker, and thought leader in personal branding and leadership development. As the founder of Package Your Genius Academy, Amanda has spent over a decade helping high achievers uncover their purpose and amplify their visibility. With expertise in public relations, personal branding, and executive coaching, Amanda's newest book, which comes out next week, is called The Rest Revolution: How to Reclaim Your Rhythm and Conquer Burnout when Overworking Has Become the Norm. I so look forward to today's conversation. It offers timely insights into the importance of rest, renewal, and resilience in today's fast-paced world. I don't know if we could have timed this better for such a conversation, such as a time as this, but I am very grateful to have Amanda to be here with us to share. And so I invite you, vodcast community, to help me welcome our guest co-host today by pulling out those accolades, those, whatever the words and reactions that you can find to let Amanda know how grateful we are to have her here today with us. And what I'm going to do is actually bring her into the spotlight. I'm doing that now. And Amanda, we do have a really special requirement that we like to do here on Intentional Conversations podcast, and that is to, before we release our guest co-host to greet our audience, to share something about themselves that we would not know from reading your bio, which we've just done, or from looking at your LinkedIn profile. So welcome, Amanda. So glad you're here. So wonderful to be in community. Can't wait to dig in, but I'll turn the floor over to you to greet the audience with whatever it is you want to share.
Well, thank you. And hello, everyone. It's so good to be here. And I would say what you may not be able to find out about me on LinkedIn is that you will likely never meet someone who has such a sophisticated coffee palate as me.
Really? I love it.
And listen, I would love to be challenged, but I
Mm.
have, favorite beans, favorite roasts, favorite single origin, favorite brews. I know my coffee. I love my coffee and I will die drinking it. I've been drinking it since I was like 12. My toddler drinks coffee. Listen, it is what it is. She's got good taste.
I
So
love that. I
that's
love
what I'll
that.
share. Maybe that I should have
So
started with that. My toddler drinks
your
coffee.
toddler drinks coffee. Yes. Now that is super interesting. So I love coffee too, but I have to say, when I hear someone that's a real coffee connoisseur, I kind of have to pull back off of the words I love coffee. I love the taste of it, but do I know all the things and do I have the beat? No. So
Well,
I
here's
am
the
really
thing.
impressed.
You don't have to know everything, but I think what it is, and this is funny because it intersects with my work just in general. I
Hmm.
am very intentional about understanding who I am. And so I
Hmm.
started drinking coffee earlier in life, but you would go somewhere and order a cup, and I might get, oh, I'll try that Colombian. Oh, I'll try that Guatemalan. And I started noticing, wow, like sometimes when I order coffee, I don't like it. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
What are the places that I like my coffee from? Like, how dark do I want my roast? When I see certain notes, am I gonna like it or not like it? So I'm very passionate about being extremely clear on what you like and just getting really granular with it. And so that served me with personal branding and purpose and coaching work. But that I feel like that coffee is a nice illustration
It
of
is. It's a
just
great
get to know
analogy. Yeah.
yourself.
Go hard, go home. If you like
Yeah.
it just a little bit, but if you really love it, then just make the
Investigate.
optimize the experience,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Because I mean, especially expensive coffee, good coffee, it's expensive when you're buying it and you don't like it. Like I want to make sure
Yeah,
I am going to enjoy.
you're right. You're right. You're absolutely correct. And so thank you for sharing that. I do appreciate a love of coffee. I do. Um, so one of the things, Amanda, before we kind of jump into a lot of the great insights that I know you're going to bring to this community, one of the things that we have been very clear and authentic about on this podcast is it's hard to show up to a conversation without acknowledging all of the different ways in which people could be experiencing life at the moment, right? And so we often bring to the conversation what has been some heavily, publicized initiatives, events, and it's no surprise to anyone that today is necessary to hold space for post-election feelings, sentiments, how people are showing up. I'll be completely transparent and sharing. I'm still processing. I am showing up to this conversation, um, also needing community as well. So I just want to acknowledge that. I am in my bathing suit cover up because I'm in Florida right now, spending the weekend with two of my DEI sister girlfriends, and we planned this a while back, thinking that it would be a victorious weekend for us to just be in community together and to celebrate. Um, but we also knew that if the outcome was such to where it would be hard to endure that alone, that we would be, if nothing else, in community with each other. And so that's where I am, and I am soaking up all of the ways in which I can just be and so I just wanted to acknowledge that because I think that's important for this community to understand kind of how I'm showing up. But I want to give you an opportunity just to socialize around how have you been processing? How are you doing? And just what's coming up for you that you would love to share with this community?
So earlier in the week was tough. It was tough. I think when I realized what the election results were the next day, I just really leaned into self-care and rest. And I did a long hike with my husband. We did about 4 miles and just talked and connected and had some coffee. and, and then I took an afternoon nap and just kind of gave myself room to not be okay and to rest. I won't say that I was like sad or crying, but excuse me, I needed to kind of not be, on my phone, watching the news, hearing people process. I needed to process for myself. Excuse me. And so I took the day, and then on yesterday, I noticed that I felt better, still feeling, a little just low, but steadier because I attended to my needs. And today I'm feeling kind of the benefit of having just honored where I was in the moment. I think so many times we try to gloss over our human experience. That doesn't make the feelings go away. It's like you gotta feel what you feel.
Amanda, I want to give you a moment because I want to make sure that you can, take care of the needs of your body. So I'm glad you have that, something to hydrate yourself with. No, but we're going to slow this down just a pace because I think it's deserving of that. And while you are still continuing to percolate on perhaps what further you want to share about that, I'll just chime in and say I appreciate that you have the wherewithal to immediately think of how can I take care of self? And I'm not surprised by that, given your platform, given your book, given like what you always encourage of others. And I think that's a message that many have been leaning into, particularly Black women. And I think that's just critically important. One of the things that stood out to me that was most painful about the outcome of the election is that while I knew the sentiments were out there, it became even more evident that the perceptions based on the election results is that majority of American citizens would rather have a white man leader and all that comes with that leadership power, even in spite of being a convicted felon, being a racist, being xenophobic, being transphobic, all the things, right? Sexist, than to have an overqualified Black woman. And that was really hard to digest. It's like it, but when sometimes the evidence follows it, it stings. It's painful. And so I think that many have been grappling with that. But I think, we've learned to be able to hold both the trauma and the joy. And I think also the beautiful thing that's coming out of it, even when I look at my personal experience, is the strong sense of community of support. I'm loving how Black women are coming together. I'm loving how at least a lot of the Black men in my immediate community are loving on Black women and supporting them and really standing in solidarity with them. And so for whatever it's worth, I think that we all need to be okay with and even encourage people to process in whatever way, in whatever timing that makes sense for them. I moved from painful anger, and I'm still not over that yet, to sadness. And even I'm having a hard time accepting simple acts of kindness without getting overwhelmed with emotion. And that's been hard. It's like this morning, my sweet girlfriends who I'm here with brought me breakfast, and I got teary-eyed. When I got out of the car and I met my friends and we embraced, I cried. When I was on the plane leaving, thinking about the beautiful weekend, I cried. So it's this notion of you start to question a lot. You start to question a lot of things, a lot of people. And that's been a little unnerving because I don't want to be in a world where I'm always having to question who's for me, who's against me, that's hard. So anyway, I am hopeful today that part of your life's work, your messaging platform, that you're going to be able to bring some light to some very important strategies and tactics that we all should be considering building into our routines that can help us as we navigate the post-election days ahead. So let's jump right in. And I want to start, of course, with your book. I shared before when I was reading your bio that your book is called The Rest Revolution. Again, it'll be available next week. And we will share probably multiple times. Yes, it's beautiful. I know. There you go. You should be so proud of that book, baby. But we will share multiple times throughout our time today into the chat how people can get their copy of the book. But you talk in the book about how the machine mindset, so I'm going to get you to unpack that for us, dates back to the Industrial Revolution. And I want you to explain how the ideas of efficiency from that era still today influence our work behaviors.
So one of the things that I found fascinating while I was doing research and reporting for this book was just to see how ideas around work have changed, evolved, and even where some of them originated. So when you think about the Industrial Revolution and we're moving from farms to factories, we have access to steam energy, transportation is increasing, so people are able to move about much more, but it created challenges because now, okay, you may not be working with your cousin or your dad.
Right.
And the whole family on the farm. You might be in a factory working with 100 strangers that you have no real connection to, but you are all here to do this job. And so a number of management thinkers emerged during that time. And one of the ones that really stuck out to me the most was Frederick Taylor, who kind of pioneered or is known as the father of scientific management or Taylorism. And his whole background, which is what was really fascinating to me, was he was a mechanical engineer. And what he noticed in different workplaces was he started studying, okay, is there a more efficient way to do this task? Is there a way to, like, you know, if I adjust the height of the table and I tell you to take 2 steps instead of 3, like, what is the perfect, most efficient way to get the biggest result, the most profitable result, the most efficient result with the least expenditure of energy, time, and manpower?
Yeah.
And so he essentially started to be brought in by companies to help them streamline and make their processes more efficient. But essentially what he was doing was showing us how to operate like machines. And I think that the goal then became for so many workers to be efficient, to operate without error, to be perfect, which we humans just, you know, we can't do. And so that's what I describe as machine mindset. That's where it began, just this, you know, a mechanical engineer advising on people, right?
Yeah.
So a mechanical engineer who is used to working with machines, advising companies on how to get their human beings to operate more like machines.
To be a machine. Yeah. And that has done a number on us.
It has.
It has. And when I think about the compounding complexity of the machine mindset showing up for people who are part of historically marginalized communities where systems of oppression makes even that machine mindset mentality go into overdrive, because, you know, we're told we have to be better than, we have to work twice as hard, we have to be superhuman. There's no grace extended to us for our mistakes. It certainly creates the need for resources like your book, like conversations like this, to make us more mindful of how do we need to then self-regulate, to be aware first and foremost that this is happening, and then self-regulate to prevent ourselves from going into this state of burnout. And so if you could just talk a little bit about how the machine mindset contributes to burnout, both individually and systemic, And then what are some examples that you can share with us about this machine mindset from a modern day work cultural context?
Yeah, so today it shows up in perfectionism, right? So
Mhm.
machines can operate perfectly because they're machines.
They're a machine.
And the expectation that we put on ourselves, and that our employers may put on us as well, is for us to operate without error and not make mistakes. And people in my line of work, the high achievers that I see, they expend a lot of energy trying to produce with perfection instead of just producing what they have and maybe refining it as they go. Like they put a lot of stress and pressure on themselves and their systems to always get it right, always be right, above and beyond perfection. And perfection really shouldn't be the goal. Progress should be. So I would say
Yes.
perfectionism is one thing. I think imposter syndrome, stay with me, is another way that machine mindset kind of gets into our heads, because it's really impossible to live up to that standard of
Right.
perfection. So then you start second guessing yourself. You start wondering, like, am I good enough? Another piece, the work as worth. Your work as your worth. I think there have been a lot of conversations about that in recent years, which I'm so pleased to see. But the machine mindset basically dictates that what you produce, your output, your level of productivity, your level of what you are doing as work in the world determines your value. And so we find ourselves overworking to try to make up those deficits and create the sense of ourselves as being more valuable, even though we are inherently valuable, just being who we are. And so I think those are three specific examples that we see. The need for rest. So machines don't need rest. They can just go.
That part.
And so
That part.
so
That
that's
brings it all full circle.
that's
Distinguish the difference. Machines, they don't need
they
rest.
don't
Say
need
that.
rest. And so, but if you are chasing your self-worth via the work that you produce, and you have as the model that if I can operate more efficiently, more productively, more perfectly, I am worth more, and you forgo rest in order to do that, I mean, you can see where the burnout lies. And I think a lot of
Absolutely.
people, going back to what you were saying about the selection, a lot of people are waking up to the fact that, like, this concept of work twice as hard, work 10 times as hard, be 10 times better than, for some of us, that just, I mean, it just does not work. Like,
No, it
because we're up
doesn't.
against
Yeah.
systemic issues and forces, all the isms that make
Yes.
it so.
Yeah. So not only is that true, but it's also true that if you just put your head down and do the work, people are going to recognize it and all the things are going to come your way that's deserving. That's also not true. So it makes it even more of a challenge, Amanda, for people, particularly those who are part of, again, marginalized communities, to decipher, how do I want to show up in this situation? How do I want to show up in this environment with this project, this, leadership opportunity? And I think that what a lot of people are coming to the realization of is that there is no guarantee either way. So protect your health, protect your well-being, be radical about really putting the priorities of the needs of your body first. And I think that's such an important message that we all have to lean into. I want to just unpack a little bit of what you shared. You talked about, I do believe that needing the validation, needing the acceptance, needing to have our output of how we can perform and what we can produce to be attached directly to our worth. It causes us to feel like just in and of ourselves, we are not enough. So language that I have been using, especially over the past couple of days, is simply just to say, you are enough. You are enough, to myself, to my 24-year-old Black daughter. I mean, you are enough. And I don't think that we hear that enough. And so I just want to bring that to the conversation, because I do believe that the burnout, the overwork, all of that is a trauma response. And we've been able to connect it to a lot of what we just talked about. Is this the system of oppression that we've been living in and having to try to navigate? But you said perfectionism is one of the reasons that, of course, the machine mindset shows up in modern day culture. You said imposter syndrome, and I agree with you. One thing I always say is that imposter syndrome is a misdiagnosis. And then working to try to fulfill this sense of worth.
And
Um,
not taking
and
risks.
Yes. And I want to slow this down because we cannot have imagined that today's conversation would be as important as it is.
Right?
So I want to, yeah, I know. I want to stay in this vein a little bit, and I would love for you to talk to us about why do you think that we as humans, we ignore our humanity in the workplace? And what are the signs that a person or an organization has fallen into this machine mindset? I mean, of course, we talked about perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and working to show or prove our worth. But why are we ignoring the humanity aspect of who we are?
Muscle memory. Like, that has become normalized, and what becomes normalized and practiced is what is accessible and available to us, right? A quick example that I share in the book, maybe a year or so ago, I was on a call. I had been introduced to this woman who was an attorney, and we didn't know each other, but like, her colleague had said, hey, you need to talk to Amanda and maybe discuss how we could partner with her within the firm. And I get on the Zoom, and she is, in an empty conference room. She's buttoned up suit, and she's like, good morning, it's good to meet you. And I'm like, hello, how are you? She says, well, honestly, I'm not that great, but it's okay. And I'm like, well, what's going on? So she shared with me that just that morning, her mentor had passed away. And, people had started texting her, and she's like trying to process this grief. This is someone who meant a lot to her, and she's trying to hold herself together to be on a Zoom call with me. And so I said, this is not urgent. We can reschedule this. And she held on to, no, we scheduled this time machine, right? Scheduled this time. It took us time to get this on the calendar. We're here. We're going to do it. And I'm like, this will hold. But what won't hold is your very real human experience of grief. I said, let me give you this 30 minutes back so you can do what you need to do to connect with the people in your life and to just have a moment to process this tremendous loss of someone that you care about. And I think, I said that, and I had to say it like 3 times. And then she finally took a breath, and her shoulders dropped. And you could see her almost like go from machine to human. And she was like, wow. And she allowed herself to feel sad. And she said, I'm going to take you up on that, and I'm going to go. And so I think that story is instructive because the type of workplace culture that would make someone believe that in the moment of such a tremendous personal loss, they needed to be perfect and keep an appointment with someone who, this is not mission critical here. I think that speaks to where we are and what we've prioritized and what we have communicated to one another that's important, and also what is not important, right? So that your human experience is not important. When you coming back to
exactly.
Are you gonna be at the meeting? You know what I mean? And that's machine. That it's like, we are not machines. We're human beings. We have feelings. We lose. We hurt. We feel. And so even today with this call and the conversation that I have with people this week, it's like, if we need to reschedule, it's fine, because
absolutely
room to process.
That is so good. And when I think about a lot of the warnings or the critical advice that many practitioners who care deeply about a human-centered approach in the workplace were putting out before the election, which was including my organization, organizational leaders, I hope that you are already communicating your plan to your employees to make sure that they know if they need to take time away, if they, don't expect them to be at 100, high level of productivity around this time. They're dealing with a lot, and we need to make sure that we are empathizing around that. And I love that your immediate response was, it's muscle memory. That is why we ignore the humanity. It's muscle memory. And the reason that stood out to me, Amanda, is because even again, just last night, some of the conversations with my DEI girlfriends, we talked about how I was sharing that when I get out of my routine, that is when I feel the most troubled. That is when some of the anxiety comes in. That is when some of the, what others could maybe perceive as depression will come in. And when I think about the words that I spoke last night, it really was, I didn't say muscle memory, but that's what it was. And it's because when we're conditioned to do things and we're doing those things, even if we love them or not, it's what feels familiar to us. And it keeps us on that path. And so I am really I'm really absorbing all that you're sharing today, and I hope that this is helpful to our community members who are connected.
I gotta
And
say
even
something else. I'm sorry
yes,
before you go,
no,
because I
sure,
felt like you were headed to another question. And so I'm like, before you do that, as you were
no. I
talking,
was go, please,
this is honestly, I won't say this is the first time it's occurred to me, but I think with this level of clarity in this moment, when we talk about muscle memory and epigenetics, right?
yes,
And so, some of this muscle memory is muscle memory that we didn't even come by through experience. It's come through the experiences of our ancestors. And so I know
yes,
in my case, I am the daughter of and great granddaughter of former slaves. And so when you think about
yes.
what would a Black slave woman, what would her options have been in a moment of grief? There weren't options.
There weren't any.
Somebody dies, you have a loss, you're in pain, you got to get back out there and keep going. And so when you think about even that physical denial and self, betrayal, turn away from my own needs, turn away from my human needs, my human feelings, because I don't have the option to experience them and feel them. You want to talk about
Right.
a machine mindset, like that's the ultimate, like slavery was the
Absolutely.
ultimate example of that. But I think what most people don't realize or give themselves the room to sit with is the fact that, you have that trauma in your body because it's passed down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of us realize it because we know a lot about our histories, and we can kind of
Mhm.
trace it back, and we can really socialize around it to where it makes it easier to seek whatever kind of help to support us as we're navigating it. Many of us, we don't even recognize that that's within us. That trauma is within us, and it's showing up and how in which we show up to the world. The example of the story that you shared about, the person you were connecting with and her mentor passing, that is grief the way that most traditionally we assign grief, right? That definition of grief. But grief shows up in so many other capacities as well. Right now, women, Black women in particular, we are grieving. We are grieving the election results, not because someone has physically passed, but a hope and an aspiration and a vision that we cared so deeply about has falling away in our minds right now, in the immediacy of the news. Now, we're going to come back from all of that. But I bring that to the conversation in context of what we're dealing with right now, this day and time, and what's happened in this week, because I want us to not listen to the dialogue that's taking place right now, and to perceive that it should not be assigned and there's no lesson for what we are experiencing, because it very much is. And so I just wanted to bring that to the conversation. Okay, I'm going to go to another question. And I have a feeling that this conversation could go on for hours and hours, Amanda, because we are just scratching the surface. But um, let's go back to this work twice as hard, having to be superhuman. There's very much deeply ingrained in a lot of cultures, particularly for high achievers, overachievers, right? Last night, I hate to keep bringing up my girlfriend's conversation, but this is so top of mind for me. We talked about, are we chasing achievement? And why do we feel the need to always chase achievement? But anyway, I want you to share with us, why do you believe that the advice is not only flawed but harmful in terms of working twice as hard?
Well, I think the election results are a clear indication that working twice as hard doesn't necessarily yield the results that one would want if what you are seeking is kind of outside of yourself and your own culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so while I don't think that we should stop going after our goals and doing the things that we want to do, I think that if that working twice as hard is tangled up in your self-worth, it's one of those things that you are never going to be able to satiate. And so what ends
Yeah.
up happening is work twice as hard. Am I there yet? Am I there yet? 3 times, 4 times, 10 times. Am I there yet? And the next thing you know, you're in a
Burnt
bed
out.
somewhere sick,
Yeah.
you've had a stroke or
Real
something
talk.
else, right? Like
Fighting for your life. Yeah.
or you have prioritized this working hard over everything else in your life, your relationships, your health, your hobbies, your time to pour into yourself and rest. And so when you hit a breaking point of some sort, you find that there's not very much there to hold and support you because you have deprioritized the very things that add true meaning beyond work.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I think that, you know, these norms, these messages that we grow up with, we have to learn to start interrogating them. Ask, like you're saying, are we chasing achievement? Like starting to do that. Like, okay, work twice as hard for what and for whom? And
Yeah.
who's the beneficiary of me working twice as hard? Is it me?
That
Or
part. That part. And for who?
like what am I
Why?
proving? What do I get? What's the prize for working twice as
Yes.
hard? Do I
And
want
is
that
it
prize?
worth it?
Right,
And
right.
most
Do I
often
want
we'll
that
say,
prize?
no, it's not worth it.
Now, if it is worth it and you want the prize, so be it. But I think it's all muscle memory. We kind of get on this track of this is the path. Work twice as hard because that's what you do. And we're not investigating and interrogating and really and pulling out, like, does that work for me? Right? Like that might
Yeah.
work for someone else. So not to say that it's completely wrong all the way, but like, what do you want? What
Yeah.
does quality of life look like for you? Does that mean working twice as hard, or would you rather have time to see your kids or hang out with your girlfriends in Florida and go, you know what I mean? But like, just
Right.
imagine if your schedule was so packed with you working twice as hard that you didn't have this space to be
Yeah.
with the very people who refuel you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm loving all of this and it looks like our community is loving it too. Jeanette just mentioned this conversation is resonating so much with me. Thank you. I'm getting teary-eyed listening. I'm with you, Jeanette. Absolutely. And what you said, which to me helped bring it into greater clarity around the why or what are the signs that we know that we're following into that trap? And you said when we prioritize it over
Everything
everything
else.
else,
Yep.
over everything else. And that
So
has
what?
a certain look about it. You're so consumed to where you can't function. You can't really plan for other things. And so that is good. Okay, so we're going to shift in a little bit. We're going to give this audience an opportunity to contribute to the dialogue in whatever way that feels appropriate. You can ask a question, and you can do so by using the raise hand feature if you're part of our Zoom community. That lets me know that I can invite you to unmute yourself. If your camera is on, I'll add you to the spotlight. Or simply, you can just go to the chat and we'll try to address as many questions as possible. If you're on LinkedIn Live, go to the comment section. We will bring your questions over into this environment so that we also can make sure you're a part of this broad discussion. But while folks are percolating on perhaps what curiosities they want to ask about or they want to contribute, I will go to the next question. And this is really a follow-up. How do we untangle all of this? Okay, we've named it, we know it, because the hard part is not necessarily being able to just be persuaded that, okay, yes, this really is a thing. Machine mindset is a thing, overwork is a thing, and it does lead to burnout and all these other things. What do we do about it? I think that is what's really hard for a lot of people. What are those practical things that we can do? And I'm talking about things that are not going to, if I do this, is it going to create another challenge that I then have to try to, deal with? Because that's usually the issue. Well, if I just pull away, then I'm going to miss deadlines, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and then that's going to cause other problems for me. So I'm seeking, maybe for myself, as well as this community, what are those practical things that we can do to start untangling what you just shared with us is deeply rooted in who we are and this trauma response and all the other things that you've shared with us.
So before I jump into like what do we do? I got to give you a little bit more background. My theory of burnout is that
please.
It's caused by, it's not just overworking, but it's just a series of misalignments. So, when I said, oh, working twice as hard, that might not work for me, but maybe it works for you if denying everything else in your life makes for a good life for you. It does not make for a good life for me. So I got to get in alignment with what makes for a good life for me. But burnout occurs when we're misaligned across the board. We're misaligned with our ambition, our time, our relationships, even our connection to ourselves. And so the trick is to start slowly shifting back into balance and into alignment with what works more for you.
Yes.
I would say rest is a very important piece of this as well. Recognizing, number one, I am not a machine, so I do have human needs. So like recognizing your humanity and reminding yourself it's okay to stop and grieve. It's okay to have a human moment. It's okay to feel what I'm feeling. What happens to most people, and I'm saying this based on the reporting that I did and the cycle that I identified from all of these people that I interviewed who were not connected, but they all kind of had a little similar trajectory. Yeah. So essentially, they're overworking on autopilot. They're back burnering their joy and their needs. They are repeatedly skipping winter, which is a concept that I talk about, like the 4 seasons of, of anything, right? Mm-hmm. Like we all have seasons where we're planting or we're growing or we're harvesting, and this is our time. But then we also need that winter rest and reflection to decide, like, what am I going to do in the next planting season? Do I like what I planted and harvested? Does this work for me? But we're not taking that time to reflect and to rest. So those are that's what brings people to those 4 actions, bring people to a burnout breaking point, which usually occurs when either they suffer a personal loss, someone passes away, they have a health crisis, or they kind of have like an existential career crisis. And so they kind of wake up. Essentially, that moment takes them off autopilot and forces them to examine what am I doing and how did I even get here? Because again, muscle memory means that you're not even conscious of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You're asleep, essentially.
On autopilot.
On autopilot. So that breaking point moment serves to wake you up. Some people, they're awoken temporarily and they make changes, and then they kind of fall back into the muscle memory. Other people make a more permanent shift. And when you make a permanent shift, typically what happens is you change your life. So you realign your ambition, you decide what you actually do want and what you're willing to do to get it in terms of your profession. You realign and restore your connection with yourself. So you start doing that investigation on what kind of coffee do you like, right? What do I like? What do I need? What do I not like? What gets on my nerves? And you start to really shape your days around your preferences. And you start to go after work that's more aligned with your preferences because you have a clearer sense of who you are. You deepen your connection. So again, everything that you deprioritize via machine mindset, your health, your relationships, your true purpose and calling, your hobbies, your time with self, your time in nature. You start to put those back on the table bit by bit. Now, some people, they end up changing, pivoting careers, changing jobs. Some people just learn to set better boundaries with the jobs that they have. They discover, oh, when I push back, that actually works. Like I have agency and power and I just haven't been using it. And so the realignments are really helping you to get back in alignment with yourself, but it's a daily practice. And that's why I recommend regular stillness practices to help you like check back in with yourself, because we're so conditioned to separate ourselves, to ignore ourselves and not listen to ourselves. So daily stillness practices help you check in to make sure, am I in alignment? Like what feels off? What do I need to change? You mentioned earlier the mantra of, I'm enough, like developing a mantra and just really sticking with yourself, because the muscle memory, a new muscle memory has to be developed, and it's not going to happen overnight. You're going to backtrack, so give yourself grace. But get in community with other people who are shifting as well, and it's totally possible.
Yeah. So you're replacing the machine mindset, muscle memory with a whole new habit, mindset, practice that is informed by the alignment exercises that you've done. No, those are some really, really great and practical things that I really do appreciate. So what happens, Amanda, when someone's, because, I know that you talk a lot about burnout culture encourages us to deny the things that energize us. What if the things that energize us is work? I mean, there's still a situation to where I would imagine that someone who gets pure joy out of the work that they do, it's still being all consuming to where it becomes maybe a little unhealthy, even though it reinvigorates them and energizes them. Have you run across that, and any thoughts for how to navigate that type of situation?
I think that's kind of like if you were to say,
just kind of saying that's the case and it's not really true.
Like, what if cocaine energizes you? Like, maybe it does, but that doesn't mean it's good for you, And I think that when we only allow ourselves access to one vehicle for joy and energy, we're not practiced in finding it in the places that we should. And so work is important. I'm not saying, oh, everybody stop working. I love my work. I think being energized by your work is actually a sign that your ambition is in alignment. And that's one of the 5 realignments. So your ambition may be in alignment, but you may need to set better boundaries around how much time you are letting work take up. Like if you think of it as a pie, your life as a pie, like how big of a slice of that pie is work. And if you find yourself not easily being able to connect to your relationships, you don't even know what your hobbies are, that is a sign to you that you need to do some deeper work to get back in touch with, well, who does energize me, and what does time alone with myself look like when I'm not working? What do I like? I had someone ask in a talk a few weeks ago when I was telling them about like, you got to restore your connection with yourself and get in touch and start putting those hobbies back on the table, the things you like. And he said, well, how do I know what I like? How do you know that? And I was like, wow, that's interesting. But it's, if you're in that space, think about it like food, right? So maybe you've never tasted sushi, but sushi's your favorite food, right? You will only know if you start tasting new foods to see what you like. If you have been socialized to deny yourself to the degree that you are not aware of what you like and what you want, then that is a call to you to spend time trying things, test driving, taste testing, different interests to find something that does light you up. And I think, like my heart kind of went out to him when he said that. I was like, oh, it was like a kid, like, well, how do I know what I like? I know. You gotta try things.
That too.
You gotta go and
Yeah.
you gotta get out into the world and see
Yeah.
what gets you going and what you're drawn to. And I told him this is another good exercise that for people who may be in that same boat. Because we are taught to prioritize work over all else, there are typically like a list of things. If we gave ourselves time to sit down and think and write it down, there's probably a list of things that you have like had a fleeting thought about. I'd really like to travel there. Oh, you know what? I'd really like to try that sport. Oh, you know what? I'd really like to, take a class doing basket weaving. But I don't have time because I got to work.
Yeah.
So when you give yourself permission to say, okay, the things that danced across my brain, but I didn't allow myself to explore them. That was my inner guidance and my intuition trying to connect with me. Right? Someone said, I want to do a floral arrangement class. Do
I'm
it.
with you, Stacey.
There's follow your hungers and your desire. And sometimes your hunger is not at the tip of your tongue. You have to kind of sit and be like, what is it? What is it that I want? What is it? What did I say I wanted last week? What was that thing I mentioned a month ago? But then I said, oh, whatever. I never have time for that.
Yeah. Or, start at least taste testing.
Start taste
testing.
But I'm sure there's something you saw in the world or you read about that you were like, oh, wow, if I ever had the chance, I would try that. Though that's where you start. You follow that curiosity and that hunger.
So here's what's coming up for me as you're sharing all of that. And again, this is really rich. There are some people who would say, well, if I love this one thing and it's like all consuming for me, but it brings me great joy. Okay, what is wrong with that? Why do I now have to implement other things into my life as well?
Well, in that case, maybe the thing that's bringing you joy is hitting all those buckets. It's hitting your ambition. It's hitting your need for connection. Maybe it's putting you in community with people that are energizing to you. Maybe it is helping you tap into skills that you would, be tapping into whether you were working or not, right? Like maybe you're just an organizer or a cheerleader or an encourager. And maybe you get paid to do that, but if you weren't getting paid to do that, you'd find a way to do it anyway through volunteering. So my whole thing is, if your health and your relationships, your well-being, your nervous system are okay, then you're okay. Like, I think someone who would say, well, what's so wrong with all of these things would be someone who's not in burnout. I think the issue is when we're in burnout. So then we need to start making alignments. But if you're, on all cylinders and it's working for you and you're energized and you're feeling good, have at it. Like, continue on. But once you hit that burnout breaking point, that's your sign that it's time to do things differently.
I cannot wait to get my hands on your book. You're so well studied. The fact that you summarized my question a moment ago, just with saying, okay, yes, it is possible that there are some individuals who have that one thing that consumes all of their life because it is in alignment with so many of the other elements that causes them to feel whole and complete and enough. And you said, but if your health is intact, your nervous system is intact, your relationships are healthy, then maybe there's not something to worry about. And what I love about how you have engaged in this conversation with me, Amanda, is that I do feel like this topic is so nuanced. I mean, while we know that there's some fundamental foundational considerations for people to interrogate their own habits around, I think also everyone's situation and their path is so nuanced that it does take really just kind of evaluating all the things to be able to land at a place for, is this now a threat for me, or is it something that I need to safeguard against with some other practices? So I know that I have been helped. I tell this community all the time that I show up to these conversations looking to learn, as well as looking to be able to get our community to learn. I'm hoping that people are walking away feeling much more knowledgeable and informed about how do we pay attention to our bodies, and when we start noticing these things, what do we do?
So I want to say something really quickly,
please.
Because it speaks to what you just said about paying attention, and it brings us full circle to my, fascination with coffee. One of the things that I tell my clients, I tell my children, I tell anyone I care about to do is to become a student of yourself. Become a student of yourself. When you know your limits, your boundaries, your likes, your dislikes, your preferences, your limitations. That's how you can manage that sense of misalignment. When you know what alignment looks like, you're better able to see when you are veering towards the territory that will have you misaligned, because too much misalignment is going to take you to burnout. But one of the things that so many of us are dealing with is we are so socialized to ignore ourselves, deny ourselves, turn away from ourselves, betray ourselves. So we don't know ourselves. And so when you become a student of yourself, you can get clear and start making better choices for you, not choices that were handed to you by your parents or society, but choices that you're making from that position of self-knowledge.
I love that. So, what you don't realize is that you just gave me the language for the next time my therapist asks me, and we need to normalize conversations around therapy, by the way, but the next time my therapist will ask me, so what are we solving for today? What are we focusing on today? And my response now is always going to be just an increased knowledge and in-depth student of self. I think that's so rich. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope this has been just as helpful for each of you who have joined us today, and for all of those who would catch the podcast or catch the replay after today, and that it will be fuel that you need just to keep going forward in a way that allows you to show up as your best self in whatever capacity and whatever environment. Thank you for joining us. Amanda, so grateful. I cannot wait to get your book. We've shared it multiple times into the chat. Get Amanda Miller, Littlejohn's book. And
The
I'm
Rest
sure
Revolution.
there you go. The Rest Revolution. Let's say it a couple more times. The Rest Revolution. Get it, get it, get it. And have a safe and wonderful weekend. Thank you so much, Amanda. I so appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Everybody connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yes. LinkedIn information is into the chat. Yes. Connect, connect, connect. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.